Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the late night chat with Margi Connor and usually Peter Goodman, but he's in India. Um, so I am so excited about this episode of the late night chat. No, I'm just kidding. It's not a TV show as much as I'd like it to be. Um, but today we have our very own Josh Wolterding, who sometimes goes by Momo and sometimes goes by Josh Bosch Juicy, which is what he's going by today. So last week at the end of our call, I believe it was Rich, but somebody was just saying that they were really interested in how the younger people have had their sort of coming to Baba experience. And I mentioned that we should get Josh on here. And everybody goes, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. So we, Diane putting her thumb down over there. We are turning it over to Josh. He has many accolades. While he is attaining a business degree currently, he is also a theater, I don't know what to call it, a theater lover, I guess. Also a community creator. He's extremely creative in his own right as a writer and avid doodler and journaler, but then also an artist. So he is multifaceted to say the least. But I am going to stop talking and turn it over to Josh, who is in lovely Sydney, Australia, to tell us his Baba story. And Josh is very creative, so maybe he'll have other things to tell us about. And then also, I just want to let everybody know that if you have questions, just put your hand up and Josh will answer any that you might have. So, Josh, it's all you. Oh, looks like you got a question right away.
Yeah, yeah. Please, Rich, go.
All right,
Go
Josh,
ahead, Rich.
I know you're a pretty cool dude and all that, but I just found out recently, it's not a Baba thing, but that Sydney's building a humongous underground subway system.
Yeah,
I
they
didn't know
are.
that. It's huge. It's huge. Okay, that's not Baba, but okay.
No,
Thank
it's
you, Josh.
cool. I'm actually very flattered that you know about that. It's normally a lot of Americans don't know very much about where I live, so it's nice that you know that. Yes, they are building a gigantic tunnel, and it's pretty cool under there. It's like being in a sci-fi. I love it. Um, yeah, it's great. I'd love to show it to you, Richard, if you're ever in Sydney one time. Yeah. And Margie, I'm so glad that you brought up the TV show thing, because I actually feel like they're like the late night live TV shows that you have in America that aren't as popular in Australia, but you've got some hosts like Margie or Jeff, and then they've got another person on and they're doing some kind of stuff. But yeah, no, I think that's cool. So yeah,
It's the
raise your hand.
future.
Exactly. Raise your hand anytime you've got a question. Feel free to do it. I love questions. I'm a very theatery person, so not shy at all. But yes, I'd love to give my barber story to you folks. What it was like to be growing up as a barber lover. Because it's definitely unusual, right? And you're all going to have to do it at some stage over the next 700 years. So get ready. The journey starts with you're just an ordinary child. Imagine you're an ordinary child, but there's all these pictures of this strange man around your house. Okay. And one day I asked my father, because I think you'd ask them who that is, and they'd say, oh, that's Maya Barber. But I mean, when you're 2 or 3 years old, you can't really understand who Maya Barber is, even if they say that's God. God's just another name like Jim or James or John, right? So I remember one time though, my earliest barber memory is asking my father, is Mayor Barber a man or a woman? Because he had long curly hair, like as a 2 or 3 year old would think a woman might have, and a mustache, like a man might have. But also, interestingly enough, yeah, the whatever painting they had in the house might have been very feminine version of Barber, but to my eye as a child, he looked very feminine. And my father, who's sort of like very like a very sort of like academic like person, said, Josh, he's every man and every woman all together. And so that just confused it even more, like you really get confused as a kid when they're talking about Barber. But now, as an adult, I think that's a cool way to think of Barber, as being this sort of beyond gender kind of form. But yeah. Yeah, so a little bit about my parents. My father is he's one of those Barber lovers that's causes a lot of controversies because he's got a very big temper. He met my mother in Malaysia. My mother went to Malaysia because she went to Tonga first, but she had grown up in a Catholic household, but was just spiritual. And I believe one night she stayed up all night praying to God, to be of service to God. And I think the next day she saw a notice for, if I recall correctly, a sort of a helper in some manner in Tonga. She had finished her degree, I believe, at this stage, and was maybe doing her PhD. But basically, I think she went over to Tonga with the idea of helping starving people in Tonga, to save them for God. But what she didn't realize was at that time and in that specific place that she went to, the issue they were dealing with was actually obesity. the people that she imagined were going to be starving were just like super overweight, and drinking like white bread, and then they pour Fanta soft drink into the white bread and they'd eat that, and that would be like a tasty snack. And but yeah, so sort of God did a funny one, a funny trick on her. But yeah, eventually, she was doing stuff in local council, met my father, and they fell in love, and they ended up getting married in Malaysia. I don't even know that my dad talked about Barber very much to her. He probably just put a picture up on the wall, and then, if she asked who he was, he'd say, "Oh, that's Mayor Barber," something like that. My father was an American who left America, joined the Peace Corps, was already probably middle-aged by the time he met my
Alexa,
mom.
volume 10.
Can you hear me, Tina?
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Don't
didn't
worry.
know I was unmuted.
No, I love it. I love to hear your voice. It's a good reminder. Yeah, but Mum basically became a Barber lover when Dad took her to India. I can't tell a story, but the gist of it is she was seeing Barber in trees and leaves and everything, feeling love. She was blown away hearing the Gujarati arti being sung at dawn by these old ladies at the tomb. She was like, "Wow, this is incredible." There was one of the mandali, she said, she knew he could read her mind. He did something that to her, she realized he was reading her mind or something like that. She hasn't told me much about it, but yeah. So she got into Barber. She's never sort of gone around or proselytized to other people. She's a quiet Barber lover, but she works at a local city council, and she has a picture of Barber on her desk often. So yes, and then they moved back to Australia, and I was born, and I was sent to a school that was very similar to a Steiner school, so not exactly a Steiner school, but very similar. And years later, I would discover that one of the Australian Barber lovers had worked there as a teacher when the school had just started out, maybe 20 years ago. It was a pretty young school. And that's very shocking because there are not many Australian Barber lovers. The statistical chance of that is nil. To have had this Barber lover work at a school, pretty low, given that there were only maybe 2 other Barber lovers in the Blue Mountains, at that time. like Max, which is where I grew up. The Blue Mountains is a series of villages that I grew up in. Okay, yeah. So I'm going to these things. I'm starting to see a bit of barber, but what's most important is that my parents were bringing me to barber places when I was younger, and as a child, it felt like these were pretty special places. Like I couldn't verbalize it or anything like that, but just playing with other kids, as kids do in these barber places, like it literally felt like it didn't feel like a real place. It had vibes of like, I don't know if you can recall going on a holiday when you're a child and you're still fresh in the world. So things are so joyful and colorful and bright, and maybe combine that with the sound of wind chimes, maybe some jasmine or some like floral scents, and you're starting to get the vibe, right? And this is later as an adult. It's the vibe that I associate with barber, right? It's like I think what people call the fragrance, even though it's not like a literal fragrance. I think it's like the whatever you call the vibe around barber that some people get at the tomb. But as a child, I was super open to this, and this would be one of the foundational cores of actually later as an adult recognizing that, wow, barber is a big deal. Remember that incredible feeling I got in all those barber places. It was this feeling of sort of like safety, of love, of protection, of warmth, of playfulness. Like I remember, so my parents took me to India when I was 4 years old, and like just playing in the MPC where they had these arches in the MPC, right? These ordinary metal arches, and there were bougainvillea purple flowers growing around. But to me, this was like a fairyland, and I was like, this is so. I was just like off in my little world. I was playing with the other kids, and it was incredible. And some of some helper over there tried to give me as a small child some seeds to take home to have my own special magical garden back home. But even as a child, I told them, or I thought to myself, no, you don't understand, it won't be the same, the specialness is here. So there was something going on. Yes, my father took me to India when I was 4 years old, even though at that time you weren't meant to take young children, because he knew that Erich was not well at the time, and he got an intuition that he should take the children to see Erich before Erich passes, and so he did. Yes, it was interesting. Yeah, a trip filled with lots of highs and lows. Traveling with my father was always very scary because he would go into very sort of like very strict, very controlling, like very scary stuff if you can relate. But yes. And so okay, so yes, I then wouldn't really think about barber very much. My parents sent me off to the Australian Youth Sahavas, which is not the American Youth Sahavas. It has a lot less people than the American Youth Sahavas. I never went to the American Youth Sahavas. But the Australian Youth Sahavas also, again, as a young person, provided me with, it was just, it felt very good, it felt very right, it felt very special, but not even that, it was unconscious. I wouldn't have put that into words. I wasn't a Barber Lover at this point, maybe sometimes I would think, oh, maybe Barber's real, but that would be the rare exception. Most of the time I wasn't thinking about Barber, and I was just embarrassed of Barber being on the walls. Oh my God. When your friends come over as a small child and they ask, who's that man on your wall? And then I would explain to them, I'd be like, oh, that's like Mayor Barber. That was like, it was like painful embarrassment. That's how strong the embarrassment was. But I'm so glad that I did it, because that was probably their first time hearing the name, this, in all their soul journey. Yeah.
Josh, Rich has his hand up.
Yes, Rich, the questions, please, anytime.
Yeah, you mentioned 4 years old. Did you have any experiences around going into the tomb at 4?
I actually I would have gone into the tomb, right? I'll tell you my experience. I do have a couple of fun experiences in India as a 4-year-old. I couldn't remember the tomb at all. And I thought, as an adult Barber lover, that I had no memory of the tomb at all. And I was so disappointed. I'm like, oh, damn. Like, I knew I probably went in and bowed down or whatever. But then when I was there in 2016 and I had the prasad, the orange prasad, and then the rose sesame prasad, I was like, oh my God, I remember this. And the taste and the flavor could come back. So I can't remember the tomb, but I can remember the flavor and the taste of the prasad and loving the prasad because my father was so strict. I was never allowed sugar, but that was like a time where I could have sugar. So I was like, that was incredible, I also thought that, because I did meet Erich, I also thought that I had no memories of Erich. But after analyzing, I did come across a memory that I think is of Erich. I'm 95% sure is Erich, where I didn't realize who Erich was. And I thought Erich was quite sick. He was quite old. He was a bit chubbier at that time. I thought I was actually hugging that stone statue of the garden Buddha that people put in their gardens, that really fat Buddha that ornament. That's who I thought I was meeting in this 4-year-old mindset. And it's not a terribly far-fetched, far-flung concept. I feel like they're both sort of like these sacred people, I guess. But yeah, and so I did hug him and very happy for that karma. I feel like that, like the karmic link is worth a lot. It's like, yeah, it's very good. And the other funny story was apparently my father went in to show Muhammad the Must to me, right, as a small child. And I can't remember this at all. I blocked it out. And he's just telling me my experience as an adult, that he could remember. But I was apparently I suddenly became very scared of him. And I went and I hid my face in my father's legs. And I must have been really scared to do that because as a child, I was terrified of my father too, right? So I must have, for whatever reason, become very scared of this thing and this Muhammad the Must's face or whatever, because he had an unusual expression. And then apparently Muhammad got quite confused and the person was translating saying, he can't see his eyes. Muhammad can't see his eyes. Where'd his eyes go? Something like that, because I was hiding my eyes. But yeah. So that was my India experience. I also got bit by a dog and there was a whole rabies scare. And I think I had to go get a rabies injection. But thankfully I blocked that out because I think that's very traumatic to get the injection right in the stomach. Maybe me and Margi can unpack that later in our trauma therapy sessions. Yes. Okay, and so yeah, then Barber was just the weird guy on the wall, and it was only until in high school where I started getting really depressed and anxious, like super depressed and anxious, that that eventually I would take a second strong look at Barber, but yeah, I got very anxious. My parents had separated. They divorced when I was 7. My father had a lot of anger issues. I felt very unsafe a lot of the time. So it was very natural for this highly strung student to suddenly just have like a breakdown. I'd been under so much stress that I'm shocked I didn't have a breakdown earlier. And so I basically couldn't study very much. I was just so anxious, so depressed. Yes, I was, really, really sort of like strongly leaning towards, wanting to leave this world. But what ended up happening is, I'd slowly been starting to get a little bit more spiritual, sort of to help me understand the painful existence of life. But I hadn't been getting into barber, and at school, and I just started drawing infinite waves on an infinite ocean of calm, right? And I just was drawing, and I'd feel pages and pages of this infinite ocean, and then I developed this incredible abstract art practice, and still to this day, in my journals, I draw these lines that you can see here, right? Like that's the the lines of this infinite ocean. I can send better pictures later, but it's just lines, right? And I would get this piece of poetry stuck in my head it was written by Ted Hughes and about Sylvia Plath, and that basically when Sylvia Plath was very young, she was on a runaway white horse, clinging to the neck of this runaway white horse, and Ted Hughes was talking about how something within her, not her, clung to life, and that poetry piece would be going around again and again in my head, and so that was one of the things that I was like, okay, I'll cling to life, and and I wasn't even thinking of Barber as the white horse or anything like that, but I do think this was Barber. I'd have other experiences like in teenage culture, like sort of drugs would just be the normal rite of passage, so I'd be taking drugs and hallucinogens, right? And I'd suddenly get the intuition. I'm like, wow, the entire universe lives within the shadow of a gigantic being that doesn't want me to do drugs, and I hadn't read any Barber scripture or anything like that. I was just thinking this stuff, and I'd often be like so taking magic mushrooms, which are like created this terrible hell experience within me, right? It's like it was horrible, like I was seeing like demons, and I'd call out to God, and I'd be like, God, where within, and say, I do love you, Josh. I'm going to save you this once, but don't do this again, and then the demon would be taken away, whatever, something like that. This is all just stuff. But then, yes, eventually I would become interested in Barber because I had some other spiritual stuff and it helped me with my depression. And so I read Jean Adriel's Avatar. And whilst I was reading it, I could connect again with the feelings of Barber's presence or whatever when I was a child in Barber places. And that really attracted me. And I just started incorporating Barber into my journaling practice. And I haven't looked back. It's like a switch was flicked. And I mean, it wasn't flicked immediately. It was flicked over maybe 2 weeks or so. And I was magnetically obsessed with Barber, and, just like that, I'm obsessed. Yes, he's my focus, Bill LePage said this great thing once when he was talking to Barber that I feel in myself too. And he said, Barber was asking him how much faith Bill LePage had in Barber. And I think Bill LePage replied something along the lines of, Barber, I'd follow you even if you're not God, that's how much that I follow you, and that's how much that I like you. And yeah, for me, it's the same. It's not even about this intellectual thing of Barber is going to give me happiness or whatever. It's just, it's magnetism. It's what I describe it. So yes. Yeah, that was in 2015 that happened, you know, so that's 8 years ago now, coming up to about 8-year anniversary. Yeah, I went to the tomb in 2016. I bowed down there. I basked in the presence at Merazad, you know, and yeah, I that's pretty much. I feel like that's the condensed version. I try to keep my barber story short, you know, to the point, but I'm sure that when I eventually write an autobiography or whatever, you know, I'll have all the details. But yeah, feel free to ask any questions. But yeah, other than that, I'll start going on and talking more about stuff, other stuff. But yeah, basically any questions about that before I go on and do other things, raise your hand now.
All right, looks like
We'll
we've
put
got
something in the chat.
Diane, or maybe is it Terry or is it Diane?
Diane. Hey, Josh.
Hey.
This might be a question for later, but let me just ask it. Since some of the topics we've been talking about is the communication between young in age Barber lovers and older in age Barber lovers, and the communication and the getting along, or the, you know, if you could talk to that. And because I think there's also many different subcategories, like people who came from Baba families, who, you know, people who came to Baba, you know, in their teens, you know, that and that. But what's it like for you with older Baba lovers, older in age Baba lovers?
Yes, it's very interesting. Yeah, this is like a big topic, I feel. I I relate to a lot of them, you know. There's a great a barber book club in Sydney where we meet once a week at this lovely lady called Chris Wilde's house, and she cooks us dinner, and we read through a barber book. But it's really like we also like discuss it, like we read it, but it's mainly just like putting the book down and asking what the hell is he talking about here, and then we all just are joking and laughing about it. So I have always felt that I connect with older people quite well. Yes, there are also some older people, you know, naturally who are a bit standoffish, or, you know, some who, you know, I feel like I don't get on with as well as others. I feel like that's just the natural process. I feel like I'm a bit of an outlier in the group. Like there's a lot of what I perceive as sort of like young barber lovers who sort of feel resistance to the old barber lovers, and there's some old barber lovers that feel resistance to the young barber lovers. I feel like I'm not a part of that, so I don't feel that resistance, right? I'm in the group of of some young people and some old people that sort of connect everywhere. But I would say that I'm shocked that it hasn't become more extreme than it is, and I actually think it will become more extreme. We're gonna have, I think Barber is a stirrer, as Margi put it the other night, and I think he's going to stir up a lot more. I really do think we're going to have like a grinding of baby boomers versus, you know, Gen Z and Gen Y together, you know, and they're gonna, or you know, and Gen X too, or whatever. But yeah, basically it's going to come out even more. But it's his classic game, right? Like, I know this guy. This guy, he's like, yes, he's God, but he's also Loki, right? The trickster, you know, he's like Krishna. So he's games within games within games within games, right? And like it's like I know, like, there have been times when older barber lovers have, where I've been tempted to sort of get terse and angry at older barber lovers because they're doing something that I perceive as not welcoming, you know, but I don't, because I want to win, you know, I want to beat Barber at his game. He wants me to lose my temper, you know, and fuel this conflict, you know. It's just like in the ashram where he'd go and say, so and so's been saying this about you, when they haven't at all. You know, he's just stirring. And it's going to keep on happening. It's going to, and to be honest, it hasn't even started, because it's going to start happening with East and West. You know, it happened with, you know, Charles Haynes, with queer and non-queer people, or anti-queer people. Barber is going to test our willingness to accept one another. You know, there's some Barber lovers that I'm so close to, and but they're just completely opposite political spectrum to me. But I know that I accept them as much as I can, because I think it's part of this game, right? Yeah. So basically, that's what I'm going to say for now. There's more to be said. I could just keep on talking, but yeah, I feel like that's that I was saying about the young and old divide at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I think that's a very, very good point. There are many facets to that conversation. Let's go to Ben.
I kind of had the same question that Diane had, and it sounds like it has, like you just said, just 5 seconds ago, Margie, you said that it has a lot of this, what Josh just brought up has a lot of aspects to it. The aspect that I guess I'll just like try to pin it down with the question I have. I lived in New Delhi for a year with my son, 23-year-old son, Landon. He's 23 and he's grown up, and he just saw Baba's pictures on the wall. I decided when I brought up my 4 boys, I wanted to make sure that they could see Baba's picture, but no big explanations. I wouldn't go out of my way to talk about Baba, and I wouldn't go out of my way to not talk about him if they ask questions and all. But when we were in India, we went down a number of times to the tomb, of course, and Landon was able to very beautifully show, you know, how his heart was with Baba. And it's odd. I'm glad we're having this meeting, because he just the last couple of months has been asking me more than once. I can tell there's something eating away at his mind, and it's like, where are other people in their 20s who love Baba? He never went to any of the Sahavas in South Carolina or anything, and so I just invited him to come and watch this with me, because he seems to be looking for other young Baba lovers, you know. And so my question was kind of more simple. I was just kind of, if anybody in here could address how many in the different waves that there have been since the boomers, all of us, because we all have each other, and we have history, and there's a lot of us, and we stay in touch with each other, obviously. But his question, it was his question, and I'd be able to tell him something if I get any answers here. That his question was like, what about the kids who are now in their 40s? Because we're talking about baby boomers, we're talking 60s and 70s and 80s. And now we're talking about the other generations. There's like 2 of them, aren't there? I mean, 3. I mean, there's the 40s and then there's the 20s. That's the way I think about it. And I really feel like I would love to be able to tell Landon, well, here's the deal. You know, there's exactly 10,000 Barber lovers living in, and then there are the boomers, and then there's like 3,417 that they're in their 40s, and then there's like, included in there is my daughter by a first marriage and my son. They're in their late 30s and mid 40s now. And then what about the 20s? I'm not asking for numbers. He's saying, yeah, give me the exact numbers. But my son Landon wants to know who's out there. So that's kind of my question.
Yeah, there's a lot
Oh, sorry.
less. You go, Margie.
I just want to say one thing before you go on, but Ben, depending on how old your son is, there's the young adult Sahavas coming up at the Mayor Spiritual Center, which is kind of was created for this purpose.
He's
of,
23.
You know, well, that's the last year.
I'll have him down there in a heartbeat. I'll have him.
Yeah, it's
I'll have him
November.
registered. Yeah.
Yeah, it's November 9th to the 12th. So that's coming up. You can tell him to come to that.
That's the last 23. Oh, that'll be great. Thank you. I'm so glad I brought
Yeah,
that
of
up.
course. Go ahead, Josh. Sorry to cut you off.
No, it's all good. Don't worry. Yep, it's a lot less from what I can see in Australia, you know, and I mean, and maybe there's a lot of quiet ones, you know, where they just don't go to barber events. That happens. There are a lot of quiet barber lovers. But yeah, there's a big reduction in numbers. There are a couple in Australia, you know, but they're few and far between. Especially, you know, in the younger generation, you know, there's not many, you know. It's yeah, it's interesting. It'll be very interesting to see what Barber's doing, you know, with the sort of the lack of people. Like, I don't know if he wants a new phase or whatever. But yeah, and I know, and I could say that it's just very isolating often, you know. So if you want someone to chat with, I'm happy to chat with him. You know, I'll chat with anyone, even the folks here, you know. For me, age is not a big issue, but I especially do know that I yearn for young barber lovers, you know, just because yeah, there aren't many around. So, but
What about
you know,
that group? Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to ask about that group. You mentioned that you have a book club that meets weekly. Do you guys lean on each other?
We do. That's a great group.
Yeah.
I think it's the best barber group in the world, but that's my subjective opinion. They're, how do I say this tactfully? They're not of my age group. There's a lot of they're older generally. You know, they'll call a 45-year-old person, you know, like that's like maybe like the second youngest other than me, and then me 26, you know, that's the big gap. But yeah, so yeah, feel free to, you know, reach out and give my contact to your son if he is into just like chatting or whatever, you know. It doesn't even have to be about barber. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we got Rich.
Well, I have two thoughts going on. I'll talk to you about something, Josh, after I make the first thought. But the first thought is, for all the baby boomers my age, I didn't have children, but I know that many had children. And I guess because I'm isolated now where I'm at, but I'm a little puzzled by how they express their desire, their love, their longing to be in Baba's presence, because I don't live near the center. I haven't seen much of that, but I know that in Denver, Ben would know, and Bob, that there was a Baba family named Nick and Janet Descalos who had 3 girls, 4 years apart, and Tina, Ella, and Anna, and they all got into teaching education for children primarily. But I don't know, and I doubt if they're what you would call active Baba lovers. But they, you know, when they were young, of course, they went to Denver meetings and whatnot. And so that's a puzzlement to me. I wonder how, of course, Ben has talked about his first family, and I didn't know them, but, you know, Bob Yeager has 2 sons. And, you know, the Denver group, once the baby boomers were kind of dissipated, I don't know that it's kind of like leftovers in Denver for a Bob group now. It's not like the young people who are 50 or 43. Second point is, you know Therese Meinheim, right?
She's my housemate. I'm share housing with her.
Oh, really? Well, then you know Paul. Well,
yeah.
Paul, I heard his story once, and it is, Margie, if you can get Paul on here to tell his story, because I mean, it blew my mind, and I'd have him tell it to all kinds of people, because he lived in Boulder for a while and was kind of in and out of the Denver group. And, you know, when he was like 30-ish or something. And it's a mind-blowing story of how he actually came to Baba originally. Just, it's incredible. But, and then of course, he's part of the Marana, I think, with Therese, you know, and now he's an Australian now. He's forgot he was ever a part of Santa Barbara culture. So, but if you want to hear, if you haven't heard his story, Josh, ask him. Ask him. I don't care what he says. Demand it. It's really great.
I have heard it before, but I'll definitely want to hear it again. It was a good one, yeah. And but yeah, I think it's really interesting you brought up Barber Lover kids, that aren't as into it. I actually want to bring that up too. Like lots of Barber Lovers I know like feel sad that their kids aren't Barber Lovers, but in my opinion, they're definitely Barber linked. Like I think that just because someone's not a Barber Lover this life doesn't mean that they're not on a deeper level connected to Barber, because of how quickly I switched, right? I went from not caring about Barber at all to then suddenly, in a period of maybe 3 weeks, I was completely focused on Barber. So I think there is deeper stuff at play. And I always try and support, the adult Barber Lovers that I know by saying, those kids, they're Barber connected, and you seriously don't have to worry about them. I think it's, I actually think they're probably getting a life off. They probably did a lot of really spiritual, difficult work in the past life, and Barber's giving them a life off, where they just get to be an agnostic and have an ordinary family and kids. But yeah, because like my brother, he's not a Barber Lover at all, and I think that's like fair enough for him. It's yeah, it definitely can't be forced. I don't think. Like I had to come to it myself. If my parents had tried to force my hand, then I would have gone against it and I would have resisted and gone the other direction. Also the terrible truth is that in the West, a lot of the pattern is that for young people that are Barber Lovers, I would say that most of them have had in some form or another extreme mental illness or suffering in their life in some form or another. They've had some really adverse experience, and so they've really had to go through the fire like me. And so in many ways, I think it's actually a gift that a child can live a quote unquote normal life. Yeah.
I think you bring up a really good point, Josh, because I was on the committee. I was going to attend the London Sahavas, which was an intergenerational Sahavas. And, one of the questions is, what are going to happen to the centers? And then, of course, I help plan the intergenerational Sahavas. And we've also I'm also on the young adult Sahavas committee. And it's the same thing. It's like, what's going to happen to the centers? And I've brought up in these meetings that, like, the reason that there are not people running the center is not because, like, we just are like, screw that, we don't want to be at the center. It's that there's anxiety is such a rise in common day society that it's like crippling and really stops people, I would say our age or even older, from being able to do stuff that they want to do. And that really is a real factor that we're going to have to start looking at and catering to in the future of the Barber world, because I know so many Barber Lovers who love doing stuff, but their anxiety stops them from doing it.
Yeah, exactly. It's we're going to have to go through some new phase. We're going to, maybe hopefully not all of the current structures are scaffolding in Barber's work that's going to be discarded. Hopefully we get to keep some, and going through the 700 years. But yeah, and like up until recently, I would say I was probably one of the more Barber focused young people in Australia, ready to sort of like sacrifice my stuff for Barber's cause. And I've just recently come down with, really poor physical health with long COVID fatigue, right? And so I'm definitely no longer necessarily in a position to sort of be maybe like building a whole lot of stuff and doing all the renovating and carrying all the work for different things. So yes, it becomes about, as always, dancing with Barber, I feel, and maybe seeing what is going to happen with the future. It's all been in his hands. And what does he say? I need no one to do my work for me. I can do my work alone. But I mean, obviously, I want to do barber things. I'm going to have to do barber things because it's my highest focus in life. And that brings me on to another talking point is I'm doing a university assignment where I'm trying to come up with new designs for organizations out there. And the organization I've chosen is, is the Mayor Barber community. And so I'd love to hear what people would like in the future, also assuming that you're going to live for, multiple lifetimes, so let's say in the next 700 years, I want to hear what people want from the Mayor Barber community, like do you even want anything, or do you probably if you're like me and haven't stopped the wanting machine, you'll be wanting a lot of stuff. But yeah, I'm interested in hearing that. Feel free to type it out or raise your hand and talk. Let's go to Margi first because no one's raised their hand.
Okay, here I am. I'm Margi. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and I am a self-identified Barber Lover. No, I'm just kidding. Yes. So selfishly, what I want, and selfishly want to be a huge part of it. I think that Baba likes to work on my ego because, like, in my head, I'm going to be like the president of Baba Corps or something like that. No, I mean, what I see is I really see Merazad and Marabad and the center staying intact. I haven't had the pleasure of being at the abode, so I don't know, but I think that there's a real importance to keep the integrity of Baba's homes intact. And I do feel that the abode goes under that umbrella of really not changing it, not changing the structures, not turning it into like a super megadome kind of situation, because especially the Meher Center is Baba's home, and that should always be. And I think that there needs to be people who step up. And I think actually, I think it's kind of falling on people who are Josh and my age. I mean, I'm 25 and Josh is 26. People are like, oh, when are you young people going to take over? And I'm going, what about the 50-year-olds? They're not doing anything. There's a lot that I am asked to do, right? And I'm actually very happy to do it. But I'm thinking to myself, like, why are you guys only going to the 20-year-olds? Why are the baby boomers not saying to the 50-year-olds, hey, you guys have to step up, right? Because there's like, when are the young people going to step up? And there's like a whole generation that they're just skipping over. That's one thing. And Josh cut me off when it's time for me to stop talking. But but what I see in the outside world is I really see like Baba TV shows. I see like Baba social media. I see like Baba TikTok. I see Baba everywhere in the world, and really being like something that, for example, I mean, I'm very into astrology. So like when I look up astrology on YouTube or on podcasts, there are thousands of podcasts for me to listen to hear about astrology. And of course, like I know I'm getting everybody's different perspective and whatnot, but the gatekeeping that kind of exists in the Baba world of information and Baba's photos and all of this, I really think that that needs to go, and like it just needs to be out there. And Baba, Baba said there's no right way to love me. And so if the stories get messed up, which in the next 700 years, they are inevitably going to get messed up a little bit, like let's just let it happen, right? We can course correct, and of course, like keep it, making sure that Lord Meher is always correct, and the trust websites are correct, and Meher Center is correct. But like, let people just talk about Baba and put stuff out there. And I mean, that's how I feel, like bring inspiration to it.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good data. It's all interesting to hear the perspectives, and I want to see lots of hands up and lots of different people, because let's just say there's a high probability that I'm going to be one of the spearheading people in Australia, and so like I don't want to hear that I haven't been consulting you folks. So if you've got ideas about how you want the Barber Lover community to go forward, this is your window open to me now. I suggest no wasting of opportunity. It won't always be open, I suspect. So I encourage you to take an opportunity of it. But yeah, let's Marion. What have you got?
Well, what I'm sharing here and asking is could seem very heavy. My intention is to lighten up the heaviness. I am involved in some institutes and setting up an institute for our young people here in the United States and how to be raised differently by understanding energy, parents being trained how to raise children. And I have all this in my file, I've got it all documented. Between the ages of 10 and 24 in our country, the highest rate of death is through suicide. And it's a crisis in our country. And it's one that not many people talk about in their neighbors getting together, it's right now mainly in professional organizations. And there are some new institutes called the Relationship Institute, how to identify real needs, real feelings and all that. But it is a crisis. The universities do not tell parents who are having their children apply to universities how many children have committed suicide at that university that year. It was kept very quiet, repressed. But they have to report that, so the statistics are clear. So to me, that means our young people, as Baba said, the psychological is spiritual too. That's in the discourses. We don't get there strictly through a psychological path to opening to God realization, but it is an important aspect of this age. And so I was wondering, so I don't know anything about Australia, what's happening there with the young people. Are they getting more psychological support so that they're grounded in that body so they can be more open to the spiritual?
Yeah, it's a little bit more than what I understand America is. But again, it's nowhere near how much would be required to keep all these people a psychologically healthy mindset. Yeah, literally maybe 4 months ago, I found out that an old high school friend passed away by suicide. So it's a massive thing over here too. Yeah, and I fully agree with you that it's an important thing for Barber Lovers. I think that it's probably one of the things Barber Lovers of the future may do, having charities to support, people that are suffering and things like that. I think it's so vital. I so am in awe of the work you're doing, Marion, and I think it's so needed. Yeah, it's for sure. Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting challenges, for us to overcome and get creatively overcome. Yeah.
Yes, especially as we take more responsibility for our own governance without having a lot of authorities dictating to us, what for our behavior and everything. Like governments are going to change. We all know that. And so my concern is that not enough is taught from birth of how to bring the unconscious to conscious, how to release energy through the energy body, the subtle body. And Baba has that in the discourses, that we're here to bring the unconscious to consciousness. It's right there in the discourses. So we do know that on the psychological level. And it's so imperative to have that grounding. So I just want to have my say about that, because we can't skip that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'll put that in the data for my notes. And, who knows, maybe you've planted the seed and the whole Barber movement will start a big psychological welfare aspect because of that. Just before we go into Bob, Sonoba asked 2 questions. One before was, Josh, how do I invoke Barber into your activities, into my activities, not Sonoba's? Me, the ego, mine. I try and put his name where I can. So a great thing to do is when I can't go to sleep, instead of counting sheep, I count barbers, which is, ma, ba. Sometimes I'll try and just sing his name to myself, or take the name. Writing the name is also something else I do. I try and speak to him in my mind, and I try and think about him as much as I can, is basically what I currently do. Also in Sanova's question of Josh, in your organization design, how do you see those in charge of making decisions, vote, consensus, unilateral? Depends on how well you folks sway me tonight with your ideas. You know, at the moment, I'm currently pursuing an imagined model similar to the Mandali, right? So it's basically, what I want to say is lots of small different barber groups, and they're sort of oligarchically run, each of the small ones, right? So there's no consensus. So no one to be in control of anything, but each group is sort of got a small chunk of members, you know, and basically I want to diversify. I want there to be Barber Lovers who wear silly hats. I want there to be Barber Lovers who are strict vegans. I want there to be all of that diversity welcomed in a way, and then encouraged so that then it can be an ecosystem. I think it should be an ecosystem to be healthy culturally. But yes. Okay, Bob, ask away, talk away, chat away.
I just your comment about Baba sort of continually mixing things up, the Loki Baba, and that really, I think you're absolutely correct in that, and I think it's happening intergenerationally. A little bit of history. When I was in my 30s, we had a pretty large Baba group in the Metro Denver area, and everybody had kids, and we'd have picnics, and all the kids would get together and play, and I mean, it was absolutely wonderful. But now that I'm in my 70s, my boys are in their 40s, and they have families. They're so busy with family life as I used to be. They really don't. We're still having Baba meetings, but they're all attended by people my age. You know, because the young folks are so busy just trying to keep up with family life that it's very difficult. And we don't have the large sort of picnic intergenerational gatherings that we used to have, just don't seem to be happening anymore. People are spread out all over the metro area. It's hard to get from place to place. Many of the younger folks have moved to other states. So, you know, my boys both came to the center with me years ago. One of them went to India with me in 2006. They've got that Baba connection, and I have to leave it up to Baba, you know, because I don't know what's going on. I miss those larger gatherings with, you know, people and their kids and the older folks and younger folks, but it just doesn't seem to be happening anymore. So, okay, that's it.
Josh, can I just say something to
Go
that when you're finished? Oh, okay. I think that's something that I really think is of importance, and I'm not even talking about long term. I think it needs to start happening now, is the financial component of the Baba community. It's something that it's like, I think that the older generation, I know Jeff like lived off of like community soups for like, you know, most of his, but it honestly, like we're just in a financial climate where that's not feasible. And most people have to work, I would say more than full time to make enough money. And so I think that there's this feeling in the Baba world of like, you should never talk about what you do for work, or never like bring finances into the Baba world. And I actually disagree. I think that like, I mean, I'm an astrologer. So like, if you want an astrologer, you should go to a Barber Lover and like put money into the community. Or if somebody works on houses, like bring that into the community, and really get rid of this like codependent, let's do everything for free kind of thing. Cause it creates a lot of resentment in the Baba world where it's like, well, I'm doing this thing for free, but I don't really have time and I have to take care of my family. Cause Bob, you bring up a really good point. You know, well, I know a lot of people in their 40s who don't come to Baba meetings because they just don't have time because they're working a full-time job and taking care of their kids. And I actually think it's super necessary for us to consciously like bring more economic wealth into the Baba world. I don't know how it looks, but I just think by having the conversation even and being like, oh no, I need to be paid for that. Or is there, you know, is something along those lines? It just brings that flow. Cause I do feel like so much stickiness around money in the Baba world, but that's just what I have to say about that. Sorry,
I
Josh, to
actually
interrupt.
agree with, no, I completely agree with you. So yeah, I'm studying a finance major, right? I am an artist. I am like a gentle dancing writer, like artist. But I know that how important money is, well, mainly because I think we're going to hard times ahead, as many of my young peers are believing. I don't believe I'll ever own a house. I think I might have to, live in a small, tiny house. And, I'm okay with that. Diogenes lived in a barrel. That's okay. But, that's just what I think. And I'm studying finance major. And yes, and Barber was very financially oriented. He talked about money a lot. And so yeah, I think we should be mindful of money too, not considering it evil. I mean, yes, it causes a lot of evil, but it's I think finances need to be managed well. I think, yeah. Yes, Jeff, I think you're next.
There were some people here I was signing in, so I probably missed a lot of this, but I wanted to kind of describe the center. Now, this is the particular, very specific thing, but in the mid-70s, I started working at the center. Kitty and Elizabeth were here, and it was it was an entirely different work environment than I'd ever been in, because you didn't work for or under Kitty and Elizabeth. They hired, and I'm very surprised, this is like in the late 60s into the, through the 70s, this place was very busy. There were a lot of people coming, all these young people from college, all these Barber groups. So this place is much busier than it is now. And so Kitty and Elizabeth, they were like in their 70s, I think. And so what they did is they hired about 10 of us, maybe 12 of us. And we were actually between 25 and 30. And they sent us, and we ran the whole place. They did not micromanage this, our work. They basically said, go in there and with Baba and figure out how to do the job in a way that would please him. So we did the grounds, we did the maintenance, we cleaned the cabins, and the programs, the music concerts and all of that was done. When I look back, we were like none of us was 30, none of us had met Baba. And yet they had such a faith in us, and they weren't telling us how to do anything. Of course, they were shining examples, but it's pretty amazing that they have that trust. I mean, they grew up with classical music, and there's Kitty and Elizabeth in the front row listening to Bob Brown and Jim Meyer, do this kind of rock music and everything. They got into our culture. And we made mistakes here and there, but if we'd really done something inappropriate, they were there and they would have jumped in. Or if we had somebody that had a real psychotic episode, but we kind of handled this. Can you imagine that they put all our trust in these young people? I can't believe it that they did this. I mean, I only just recently thought back, just how young we were. And then I don't know if this came up here, someone asked Erich, what is Baba going to become a religion? And Erich said Bob was adamant that it not become a religion, and said, well, how can this be averted? And Erich said, if his lovers would get together in small groups and share their mystical experiences, it could be averted. If they share their inner experiences of Bob, but small groups, not some big organization. Well, I should say that when I was working here, no one was above anybody else. we were all working for Baba. You know, I mean, I don't know if this is related to what you're talking about, because I just checked in. But the whole idea of once you get a sprawling organization, then you get a hierarchy. There was that was the unusual thing about that experience, is that it was not a hierarchy. We were all we were all trying to figure out how Baba wanted us to do the work and how to please him. And we weren't like, I didn't feel that Kitty and Elizabeth were kind of peering over my shoulder and everything. I didn't have any fear or anything. And so that's an interesting way. I mean, that is very rare on this earth, to have such a way of running things. I mean, like on the cabin crew, we would get together and figure out, you know, the cabins and the people that are coming in and what had to be cleaned. We worked it out all amongst ourselves. No one was in charge, you know, and it was busier than it is now. So it worked, but it's pretty rare way of running things. But it was really something heavenly, you might say. Anyway, that's my...
No, yeah, that's really good. Yeah, it's like one of my favorite Barber quotes that has influenced me a lot is, and I mean, look it up, you know, to get the details. Like I'm never the primary source that you want to quote, but it goes something along the lines of the best thing to do to help someone generally is, if they're not doing well, is to give them meaningful work. And it's like it's so powerful. I think, you know, I think he was just talking about offhandedly perhaps about how to, you know, get some people happier or engaged or maybe, I don't know, spiritual or something. But yeah, because our lives here on this planet are work, and yeah, it's going to be necessary, you know. And I'm studying finance because I'm going to be getting my hands into some Barber finance communities, and I'm going to be getting them to save money so that we can support people, so that we can create this economy of you know, of Barber Lover helping each other. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, you know, I should want to say one other thing. Am I
Yes, go for it.
You know, back also in the 70s at Maribod, I mean, all these, you know, young people like we did here, they went and worked at Lower Maribod, and there were conflicts between the Westerners amongst themselves, turf, you know, wars, and it was a pretty dysfunctional thing. And then there were conflicts between the Westerners and Easterners, and every once in a while, one of the Westerners would go into Mani and Erich and ask them, just give us some guidelines, you know, and Mani and Erich just wouldn't do it. And months and months would go by, they come again, Bob, you just give us some guidelines. Eventually, they pleaded with them so fervently that Mani and Erich said, if we lay down these guidelines, then you'll be obeying us and not Baba. So there's so that they let that dysfunctional place go on, but they had to, you know, and that's kind of what we did here. We had to, what does Baba want us to do, not what Kitty and Elizabeth want us to do. Anyway, that's it.
That's great. That's awesome. Thanks, Jeff. All right, I think we've got Marianne again.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Jeff, for sharing about how work got done. Because I think all greater models of society start with small groups. And like you're describing, so they're far-reaching what you have experienced and still do. So I want to comment on that, because about money, because of course, Baba, once in a while I think he touched money, but otherwise he didn't. But he really did direct it. And someone explained to me once that, money in itself, like a dollar bill or $5 or whatever, and some coins, has very little really material value. And that money is a symbol of the power of manifestation when it's used correctly. So sometimes it's misused by those power brokers. And then it's for us to use it as a power of manifestation. If we don't have enough, well, ask, what do I need to do? So I'm spreading the word more and more. COVID kind of interrupted it, but for years I've been part of the time banking group, and our currency is hour for hour exchange. It's not bartering. If you do something for me, I don't have to do something for you. But we even have a computer list of all of our talents. We can go in there, and if I need somebody to walk my dog, I can go in, find somebody to walk my dog, but I don't have to pay them back. But if there's something somebody else needs of a talent I have, I will get a notice that somebody needs that. So it's a currency that is working side by side with the money currency, and it's growing. You don't read a lot about it in the popular press, but if you look, Google it, and especially the Sebastopol, New York, California, it is growing and it is dynamic because it's based on a balance of the head and the heart, a real balance. So I just want to put in a word for that yes, we have to use our money wisely and still have a money system. But as more and more chaos hits this world, is the money system going to hold up? It's a question. It's a question. Yeah. Or are we going to go to more of the time banking approach? So that is growing. It's growing. So it's not an either or, it's an and. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so good. There's so many
dog, Marion.
Time banking.
I didn't know you had a dog.
A what?
I didn't know you had a dog.
Oh, I don't. I gave it as a metaphor, as an example. Oh. I don't have a dog. I wish I did, but I don't. So it could be anything else. If I need somebody to go shopping for me or something, and whatever, I don't have to pay them back. It goes in a bank. It goes in a bank of credits and debits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to be in a babysitting group like that.
Yeah.
Josh, I'm confirming your, granting your request to wear a funny hat. You said Barber Lovers should wear funny hats.
Oh, it's so good. Thank you so much, Tina. I didn't see you there. I thought, because I've got them all up at the top, so I see that hat now, and I'm so happy you are. You're one of my icons, and it's playful. It's fun, as long as we realize it is a joke towards ourselves and not take ourselves too seriously. I think that it's great. Hopefully we don't all get into wearing funny hats and as a ritual, but we won't. It's good. I love it. It's great. And yes, right, everyone look up time banking. It's really cool stuff. I love that, Marianne. I'm familiar. It's really good stuff. Richard, I think, is next.
I love to make comments in this stuff because I think it brings the thoughts from all of us into focus around certain issues or ideas. And some of my ideas, I chip them in no matter what. But I've always been curious about how the Sufis organize themselves so fabulously and what discipline and what it takes. And when I went to the center in 19, before COVID, Alan Cohn was speaking, and there was an effort to create sort of a Sufi group or some sort of effort in Myrtle Beach around the old house that Elizabeth's family owned on the beach there. They remodeled it and all that. That's one idea. I don't know what they really do, but you got to be a pretty clean person to be a member of the Sufis. The other one is, this regards Jeff. I wanted to, you could comment on this, but I was on the center, a few times, mainly in the 80s in a row, like 4 years in a row. And of course, I had other experiences there, but I am absolutely convinced that Elizabeth, and probably Kitty too, knew what was going on in every corner of that center. No one had to call them and tell them. They knew. I mean, I remember one time there was nobody around and I wanted to take a little aluminum boat out on the lake. And the rule was you had to have 2 people. And so somebody called Kitty, I think it was, and she said, no, it's okay. But they wanted to know, because I'm convinced they were aware of anything happening on the center, but they wanted for people to know and for them to know what it was that was going on. So the rules were created for safety and for help. But I'm convinced that Elizabeth would know immediately somehow. I don't know how. Next point is on the money thing and what Margie said. It's really interesting, but I've always had that thought that a Barber lover never reveals the amount of wealth in their accounts. Never. That's a primary rule of being a Barber lover. And then, of course, you realize story after story that Barber only asked those he wanted to for money. And that was I know that you can read those stories and very strict. Barber didn't take lots of cash or money from people that he didn't want involved in his work. So it's a weird deal going on there. And of course, in America, we have this idea of you can do philanthropy on your own time. If you have money, you don't have to tell anybody, just do it, so you can contribute a little here and there. But yeah, overall, it seemed to me like what Jeff was saying about the center, Baba's got to be he's the power behind it all. And as long as someone tunes in, like the old Denver group we had, there were like pillars of that Denver group. And they seemed to be just more connected to what was going on either at Myrtle Beach or somewhere else in America in terms of the overall Baba community. I know I wasn't in touch. I was just a commoner in the group, but it was still my experience was as full as it could have been. It's kind of weird. I don't know how to express that other than the story about the center with Kitty. All right. Thank you for listening, and okay. Bye.
Thank you,
I
Rich.
know, very good, interesting stuff.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba
Yeah, go for
BJ.
it, BJ.
Yeah, Jai Baba everyone. Yeah, nice to hear Josh. Yeah, regarding money, Baba's Samadhi, it is written, mastery in servitude. And of course, I feel that if we cannot help others physically, at least some part of our money, maybe 10%, 15% should go for such cause. We must share. And one of the circulars when Baba, there was a general darshan program. Baba says he will not accept money or any gifts and all. But then he said that it doesn't apply to the invitees and his close lover. So his close lover who love Baba means, of course, they can give money or whatever help. One sister money asked me, donate to the trust. Avatar Meher Baba Spiritual Trust. So I feel very honored that at least I am parting my money when my pension comes. Something I share with the trust or Baba activities. Yeah. Once here in Maharashtra, Baba said that lovers, they can give their life for me, but not their money. So that is also a kind of comment. Means, of course, Baba will not ask, but that's the kind of thing Baba said, that people, they are so stuck with the money, sanskaras. So I think that money part also should be means getting rid of. So at least 10-15% we must share. So, yeah. Thank you. Jai Baba.
Yeah, I agree. It's especially like, I think for people in like me who live in Australia, in a very affluent country, and then there are people, maybe near Mehrabad who are struggling to get 3 meals a day, and they're struggling to, afford to send their kids to school instead of, keeping their kids at home to work on the farm or something. What difference a little bit from me can make to the lives of some of the Barber lovers over there in India, I think is so. I'm going to consider it for myself, and I'm going to be loud and proud about what I'm doing with my money. I'm going to break that taboo about it. I'm going to be like a financial nudist. Okay. So, get ready for me to just keep on chatting about money, people, and breaking down that thing. Cause yeah, it's so such a heavy topic for many humans because it's almost this embodiment of desire and things like that, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Josh, thank you so much for coming on and telling your story. And then this conversation has totally morphed into something completely different than just your Baba story. So, I mean, I think it's great. It always goes how it's meant to. But is there anything that you want to add before we close up tonight?
Yes, I do. I want to give you folks some tips and advice for of things that throughout my time with Barber I've found really helpful for myself. And of course, it's just an invitation. You never have to do anything I say. So yeah, it's a couple of things. I always ask Barber people, what's your most important piece of Barber advice? And just to try and synthesize it to a rememberable idea, And so it's only fair I ask myself this question. And I'd say my most important piece of Barber advice is taking time and writing down things that you're grateful or thankful for towards Barber. And, even if you don't, feel that all, even if you're feeling angry or something like that, you can start with things like that are having enough air to breathe, or, having 10 fingers and 10 toes, and starting with simple things. But that's my one piece of synthesized spiritual suggestion that I've had through my Barber experience over these 8 years, that I've been a Barber lover. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. That's beautiful. All right, Bing, we've got Bing's hand up.
It was brought up. I'll just throw in a pitch. There's an opportunity to leave a legacy. And a lot of these people, Josh, Margi, you're on the younger side, but those with qualified accounts, IRAs, 401ks, you could designate a beneficiary and even a second beneficiary. And those funds, when they go to heirs, will be taxed at ordinary income tax rates. So it's a tax advantage rate way for someone in planning their estate to provide money for the center, for Heartland Center, Marymount, Marana, whatever the leanings might be. So I just invite everybody to give a thought, maybe leave 10, 15, some percentage that you're comfortable with. It'll get handled automatically, and it goes to whatever beneficiary one designates. It's a very clean, easy way and tax advantage with respect to estate planning. Of course, there's not going to be that's one, you don't need to have a big estate. That income is going to be taxed when the heirs take it out. So that's it.
I'm so glad you shared that. I think that people who have because there does seem to be an abundance of Barber lovers who know nothing about financial literacy, myself included. And so people who do have it, it's like that alone is so helpful because it really is needed in the Barber world. I've talked to a lot of young people, and the reason that they're not involved is because they can't afford it. And you can say, oh, well, if they really loved it, they would, but it's just reality. So yeah, thank you. For
early stages in the life cycle. It's all good.
All right. We'll take one more question for Josh. We got Steve.
Oh, it's not really a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it anyway. That's all
okay.
Steve.
It's not really a question. It's just it's a rambling comment. I just you and Margie are the two youngest people that I have met in a variety of Baba communities since I started following Baba in 1973, and for me personally, I still consider myself a follower. I feel to call myself a Baba lover is, for me, it's a bit pretentious, and so I kind of liked what you were saying about your journey, Josh, in that regard. And we're definitely at a consequential time in terms of generations leaving the stage and generations taking the stage, and this is just the way it's supposed to be. And I like the fact that there are people like you, Josh, and Margie, and others that are kind of I don't know whether stepping up is the right way to put it, but yeah, taking the stage. And there were some comments in terms of the various generations and how involved they are or not. And I mean, for me personally, my Baba touchstone has always been Marymount, and I know that at Marymount there are there are a wonderful group of young people that are coming up, and Gen Xers, Gen Zers, blah blah blah, millennials, whatever, and they'll assume their roles as they do. And so I don't really feel any urgency, maybe because I'm 74 years old and I'm on the downslope, so to speak. People will step up. For me, this has always been about it's kind of practical mysticism, practical spirituality. And if your touchstone is Meher Baba, or if your touchstone is is Jesus or Buddha or whomever, you just the important thing is to is not to think too much, but to love much, and express your love in what you do. If that means helping others, if that means supporting, positive causes that are going to, benefit, humanity overall, or just your personal community, then that's where you need to put your effort. And I think, Baba's no fool. He's got this all figured out. And, so it in a sense, it will take care of itself. But I also see the urgency for people to, to begin to step up and do their part. I found that little discussion offshoot about, the Baba family and not, becoming a religion. And when it's not a religion, then it doesn't organize well, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know, that for me, that means little or nothing, I think what's important is just to do what you feel in your heart is the right thing, no matter what you're doing. Whether it's in your vocation, avocation, just doing what you do every day. Just try to do the right thing. So, no, I've rambled enough. So, but I thank you. So, because Josh, I feel like I'm 74 going on 26, and or maybe you're 26 going on 74. So, and Margie, you too. I mean, you know, you guys are way too young to be so like interested, creative, and involved. And it's interesting because, you know, because I did, I think what you were talking about, Josh, you know, in terms of your family, I mean, I you know, my 30s were all about you know, getting into my work and getting into my family, and I brought my kids, you know, and my wife up to Marymount a few times, and I used to take kids from the school where I was working up there because they had a neat nature walk at Marymount, and it was a wonderful thing. I didn't say anything. The kids didn't even ask me, like, what is this place? Where are we? And I said, oh, it's a great place. Just enjoy it. And so, you know, I don't know. Oh, anyway, okay. So anyway, thanks.
It's good stuff. It helps me with my assignment. So all the stuff you've been talking about is all good. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And one last thing, I've been in contact through Facebook and Instagram with oh shoot, and I just blanked on his name, but he lives in Sydney. And I
Last name Grant.
Breastfeeding?
Say what?
Last name is Grant.
Grant, yes. So last name is Grant. I see him on Facebook all the time. He's with you know, just a bunch of other, you know, Baba folks from all over. Anyway, David Grant is his name. So he's probably a little bit older. His picture looks a little younger, but I think he's probably in his, you know, 60s or so. So it's the generational divide. So
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
okay.
Um,
For letting me ramble.
Josh, I just Josh, I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing your Baba story. I know this conversation has sort of morphed and jumped into lots of different things. But we love you here so much. And I would even, I'm just gonna throw it out there, Josh, but if you want to do so, I know you're really into creative writing, but if you want to use the late night chat one night to get all of these guys doing some creative writing project, maybe we can do something like that. Josh, I want to ask you one last thing. Do you have a favorite Baba quote? And then no more hands. We're gonna end it end it right there.
Yeah, sure. Yes to both of those things. I'd love to get some creative stuff happening. We could do some awesome playwriting or something. Yeah. My favorite Baba quote is it's I'll give a little bit of context. It was Jean Adriel. It's from the first book that I read that turned me into a Barber Lover. Jean Adriel at the time was very depressed. I think she had recently just snuck out to try and climb a mountain to be bitten by a poisonous snake and die at the ashram, right? So she was like, it was like wild stuff happening. She was very depressed. But I think Barber at some stage before or after recently like had a private interview with her, and he asked her, do you think I'm cruel? And she said, Barber, I know you're cruel. And then Barber said, I am temporarily cruel so as to be permanently kind. And that's my favorite Barber quote.
That's good.
That's good. Thank you, Josh. Wow. Well, guys, let's have a moment of silence and then we'll unmute for an avatar near Baba Kuche. Avatar, Meher Baba, Ki Jai. Avatar,
Baba
Baba,
Ki Jai.
Our
Avatar.
maker.
Avatar.
Avatar.
DJ.